Welcome to the Transformation Leaders Podcast. I'm Tony Lockwood and I'm delighted that you could join me on this latest episode. Each episode takes the form of a discussion with a leader who openly shares their experiences of leading organisations through the transformation journey. Happy New Year! This is the first episode of the Transformation Leaders Podcast in 2023. And I'm delighted that Zoe Freeman has agreed to join me today. Zoe's background started in finance, but we won't hold that against her. But she quickly progressed into change and transformation, working for various organisations, both in the UK and overseas, across multiple sectors. So let me introduce you to her now. Hi, Zoe. Welcome to the Transformation Leaders Podcast. Although we're recording this in late December, this episode will be the first to be released in 2023. So Happy New Year.
Happy New Year indeed.
Like many of the guests that we've had on the show, you've had a really interesting career to date that I'm sure informs you on your approach to change and transformation. So let's start, as we always do, by introducing yourself, letting the listeners know a little bit more about your background, and I suppose answering that key question, how did you first move into the world of change and transformation?
Hi, Tony. Great to be here. Yes, absolutely. So I love solving problems. So I am known for when it's a bit chaotic or people have been bashing their heads against the proverbial brick wall, of helping them solve that so that their foreheads are less red and hurting. I started out learning to be an accountant. So I qualified as an accountant while working for a life insurance company many years ago. And in those days, life insurance companies were quite old school. It was mutual. And as a young uppity thing with a lot of energy, I got asked to do lots of the new stuff. So it was a world where you still had the dumb terminals on the desk and the PC was around the corner in a separate room. And nobody really wanted to touch it. So I was the one that got asked to do the new stuff. Yeah. And my first major change there, once I qualified, was to move the accounts payable function from one location to another, and also implement some new software to make it more experienced and recruit a new team. And I loved it. I absolutely loved doing that. It taught me a whole heap of things about people, press, and the dangers of just assuming lots of different things. So we completed that, and I just qualified. I then went to my boss and said, how about it? I've just qualified. I've been working really hard to try and get my qualification. I've just moved the accounts payable function. What opportunity there for me in this organisation now? And he said, not many for a long time, which I went, oh, okay. Because nothing changed very quickly in this mutual in particular. So I looked outside of that. I'd been there 7 or 8 years. And so I started to looking out the way and joined. I remember talking to a recruitment agent and going, you just qualified, presumably you want to be a financial controller or something like that. And I said, no, absolutely not. I don't want to do that at all. And so a slightly bemused recruitment agent said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to use finance and knowledge to change and improve things. Anyway, he found me a role as a finance business consultant for a new and emerging software company that sold general insurance software to some of the big players in the market, but it was a bit of a newbie upstart kind of company. But from that, it was kind of energetic, you can do kind of completely different environment from the considered tool that I'd come from. And I absolutely loved it. And through that, I delivered all sorts of projects in terms of general insurance globally around for some of the big FTSE 100 companies, got some of them out of the trouble. And from then I was hooked on making change and helping, businesses and organizations achieve what their goals were. So that's really where I started and how I got into it.
Brilliant.
No, not that since.
No, it's fascinating, isn't it? I think I ask that question to everyone, and a lot of times people fall into change and transformation. And that was the same with me. I got involved in a program with one of the banks. I was employed by the bank and got into the program. And then after that program, realized that I like change and transformation more than banking. And a lot of people literally just fall into it. So I think it's always useful just to get that background. So, how do you define transformation then?
So I think it's sometimes a word that's overused, and sometimes just used to define big change. But for me, transformation is creating something different, largely from some of the original ingredients, the people and the organization. But it's about changing path, changing and being a different state or organization, and being different, largely driven from usually revised vision or mission statements or new goals. But it should feel and be different for me, a transformation, but involved in some very large scale change where companies are kind of leveling up or growing, but in essence, they're the same organization. They're doing things in a similar way, just better or at larger scale. For me, that's just big change. Transformation should feel and be different.
Yeah, good. No, I agree. I think that sort of the word transformation means moving from one entity or one element to another, isn't it? And I think that's a key theme, I think, in the difference between change and transformation. So you've touched on this already, but on your LinkedIn profile, you talk about bringing joy to your business by solving those tricky problems. That's your banner headline on the LinkedIn profile. So tell me more about that. I'm fascinated to understand a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think for me, the important and probably more recently is that you can, and probably similarly to yourself, we've all been in projects or environments that don't bring joy, and you spend so much of your life doing work or being employed, and it's a real shame if you can't enjoy that journey. So when I transitioned from a more kind of permanent employment setup to a consulting one, it was really fundamental to me that as you change and develop organizations and work in partnership with certainly my customers and clients, that it's a joyful one. It needs to do that. I think you get better results. I think it feels better, and you're likely to achieve more success if it's joyful. And but ultimately, I wanted to be always in a place where I was bringing joy, but also it was joyful for me.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I suppose you touched on it when you moved into that young organisation, right? After you qualified, and that can-do attitude, and it's a number. I've been involved in a number of new starts, and it's the energy, isn't it? And you enjoy going into the office.
That's
you
right.
enjoy the process, and it's some difficult days and difficult challenges, but you just enjoy the process. And the more you can bring that into anything that you do, I think the wider team grows, don't they?
I think you also can be, yeah, absolutely. And I think you can also be more creative. I mean, a lot of what I do is about solving problems that people have been having a hard time about for a long time. And if you're not in a position where you can be open and trust and respect and be joyful with the people that are trying to solve that problem, you're unlikely to solve it positively.
Yeah.
I look back, the best wins, the most successful wins of when that team has been energized, motivated, and kind of respectful of each other. And I think it just generally brings better results, and it feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the joy part. The problem solving part, though, because there's lots of organisation out there that have got issues and challenges, especially with the markets as they are at the moment. So just tell me a little bit about the approach that you take to helping them solve those problems that have been there for some time.
Yeah, so I think I recently did a bit of a talk on this, and I was trying to understand. I am known for, if it's chaotic and kind of people are hitting their heads, send Zoe in, she'll sort it. And it was recently that I had to really think about what am I doing differently to, because they're intelligent, people that have been trying hard to do that. So, and what I look for is the real why somebody's doing it, and often that the problem isn't that they think they have, isn't really the problem that they really have, and it's just not well defined or really understood. And I saw a lovely you can search the internet, can't you, for lots of models of all sorts of things. There's lots of theory and lots of process about how you solve problems, and all of them revolved around this lovely process that says identify the problem, analyze it, come up with some load of options, select one, then implement it. Love that. Then reflect on whether that was successful again, and then go around that. Yeah. And all of the steps, other than just go implement, is all theory, because it's at the implementation stage that you really, really understand whether you can achieve it or not. And nobody has anything about that. How do you implement it? And so people go round that circle quite a lot. So my way of getting them out of that is to ask that why question. Why do you want to solve this problem? And why is that important to you? And it gets people away from the what. So often people are saying, I need to change this, or I need to develop this, or I need that software to change, but if you ask the why, you can then get a much better context and rounded shape about what all the options are for you in order to achieve what you really want to do. And that's where I always start. And I think people get caught when you're in something, when you're in change, it's really hard to step out of that and look at it holistically. Yeah. But if you've got that real strong anchor, I call it an anchor, almost a skewer through everything that you're doing as to why you're doing it, you can keep, when you get stuck or it feels like it's out of control, you can come back to that statement and go, are all of our activities aligned to achieving why that's important? Yeah.
So is that why? So is that why, more than having a clarity of vision and a clarity around where you're going to get to, is it a deeper why than that?
Yes, I think so. So you can set an outcome. So people use goals and outcomes, but if it's poorly expressed, but the outcome's clear, and I've been in so many places where they say, well, I want this kind of system to be able to do X. And you go, but why do you want to do X? Well, if you understand that, and when they do, well, if we don't do that, maybe the organization is going to fail. Maybe we don't get enough, we're going to be fined, or we're going to, and it then takes it out of that. Also, if this process has been going on a long time, if you ask why, the moment the opportunity may have passed, and actually the best thing to do is just stop it. But that's a hard thing to do if you've just been caught up within that. So that why, just for me, always gives that better context for looking at holistically, and then going, right, okay, how does this fit into the overall? How important is it? And then take some of the emotion away from people that probably have been invested in this for a really long time. Yeah. And it's hurting, because that's usually when I'm coming, when it's hurting. Yeah. And it just takes that emotion. Why are we doing that? Let's just reflect, and it kind of just takes that away and just enables that better context for making decisions against.
Brilliant, thank you for that. So we get clarity around the why. Why we need to make this resolve this problem or overcome this challenge, and then move into that implementation phase of doing something different, whatever that is, making the changes that we need to put in place to resolve that problem. If it's not one of those that's just let's just stop doing it, as you've just said. So once you're in that phase, how do you go about sort of establishing the right conditions and maintaining momentum as you go through this big change or transformation?
So I think the first thing is for the team, whoever that is, whether that goes from the leadership team to the people trying to actually make the change happen, is everybody needs to be in the same place about why we're going back to that, why they're doing it, but also then what's their role, why are they important to achieving that. There has to be some glue from objective outcomes that they want and their role within it, and they need to understand that. Why is it important? How are they contributing? And sometimes that can feel, particularly dealing with finance and kind of things like that, is in terms of positive change, is they're not just the backstop, it's also how you're contributing going forward to that. So it's really understanding their skills from their typical responsibilities to, as a team, everybody's got different dynamics. So, you've got I love Belbin still, for example, the completer finisher to the dynamic thinker, the blue sky thinker. And when you're kind of coming against obstacles, getting the team together and then just listening to everyone is really important. So that dynamic of team, understanding the importance of your role in it, but equally it's a team effort and everybody has an opportunity to speak and to be listened to, because it's those kind of conversations that can really get you out of trouble.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's interesting, again, I find a lot of organizations miss that point that you just raised about understanding the different personality types, the different Belbin types. I use something called GC Index, which is looking at where people find their energies and will naturally go towards. And they talk about game changers, people who are coming up with ideas, and implementers being opposites, really. And actually, I've been in situations, I'm sure you have, where you've got a team that are made up of game changers, ideas people, and they can never get anything done because they're constantly coming up with new ideas. Right.
Yeah.
And they get frustrated. Well, we're not very good at implementing. Well, because you keep throwing in new ideas, and having that understanding of that team dynamic is critical, I find, as you say.
And also, when things are tough, is recognizing that everybody needs to understand that change, or listen to what's actually going on, has different needs. So, me learned is I'm usually 2 steps ahead. Right, let's just get going, and then you've got that completer finisher, and I use that one a lot because I am not a natural completer finisher, but needs to know all of the nitty gritty before they're comfortable to move forward, and just taking that time to understand everybody's different needs in terms of confidence and all in order to move forward. So important. If you don't listen to it, it'll come back and bite you, definitely, later. So
yeah, and it's, as you say, it's having that understanding of the individuals, isn't it? And
yeah,
I use sport analogies a lot, and it's in that sort of changing room, knowing which ones you've got to go and put your arm around and pat on the back, understand the ones that you've got to be really direct with, etc., etc., and that's how you get the best out of your team, isn't it? Whether it's in change transformation or whether it's an operation.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's having that skill set to take people as individuals. So we've started on that process. We've started to work through the teams and individuals and been very clear about what we're doing and the reasons why we're doing it. Ultimately, change or transformation is about delivering some value. Often, I know there are lots of programs that are around sort of regulatory and compliance aspect, but still that's about creating long-term value anyway, by keeping your license to trade almost. So what do you do to ensure that a program that you're involved in generates that value? Because all too often you get a business case, expectations are set, and when you get to the end point, you don't quite meet them. And I'm not saying you, but generally, I think
Yeah.
McKinsey's talk about 70% of programs failing. Whether that's right or wrong, it's a big figure. So what do you do to ensure that value is actually generated at the end of any change?
So I think the first thing is we've established our outcome, we've established why we're doing it, but it's then taking it down to the next level before we start in terms of a shape. I like shapes and structure, and I like to use pictures as well. Too many times I've seen lots of very wordy documents and you've lost the will to live by the time that you get to the end of it. And equally, nobody remembers all of those words. So what I like to do is create a shape and a bit of a structure to it. There's usually some, whether you call them pillars or foundations, or kind of a structure of some form that says, and what's our approach to achieving that outcome? What are the core elements of that outcome that need to be true or need to be delivered? And then what is the metric for saying we've done that? Mm-hmm. So it might be we've just, some of them are obvious. We've moved from building A to building B. We have or we haven't. Some of it's financial. Some of it might be slightly softer. But whatever it is, we then know we need to know when we've done it, and we need to know what's good enough. And often with these things is there's the perfection option, and then there's the what's the minimum. So many times in minimum viable products, don't like the term particularly, but it really is important to understand that, but not just in terms of the individual pillars or elements of that outcome, but what is the metrics for the overall outcome, because it can be that one of the avenues of your program can derail the overall objective if you're not careful. So it's having that I call it a cohesive shape, and then a clear approach about how we're going to organize ourselves around delivering those blocks, those pillars, etc. And then regular catch up, being able to be clear where we are. And I think people are afraid of saying bad news as well. It's just being honest. This bit's going well, this bit's going less well, and here's what we need to do to change to get that back. It's not about blame, or it's not about, but it's being really clear. And if you're not clear, it won't be motivating to the people that you're working with, because they'll know that it's not going very well. So shape, clear metrics, keeping those metrics honest as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And as we go through change and major transformation, it can be stressful for many people, including the people that are leading the change. What sort of things do you do to mitigate that stress or anxiety, or just to relax and chill out? What sort of things can you share that other people might be able to take advantage of?
Hopefully, the ideal is when you've got your motivated team, you're working really well together, and everybody's motivated, and that's quite an easy one to start. Even when it's difficult, you've got that team bonding. You can share, you can go out, talk about it, whether that's go to the pub or go for a coffee or whatever, but it's kind of allowing that team to de-stress and have an opportunity to do that. So often, though, in some of these really high pressured, where you've got fixed time frames, where it's not you're going to transform something from something that isn't pleasant, for whatever that is, to something that is, or to save something, it's not always possible just to do those things. And certainly during COVID, when everybody's virtual, that normal kind of personal interactions not so easy to achieve. For me, when it's really, really stressful, is as a leader, is looking after myself so that I can stand tall through it. So despite the pressures, despite the stress, despite what the rest of the team are feeling, is that they're seeing me being positive, we can do this, understanding, time to listen, etc. And that means I have to look after me, and things that I do that I've got some, depending on the level, some wacky one. I try and look forward. So if it's going to be particularly difficult, what are the things that I need to do? And I also let my friends and family know, look, this next month is going to be really hard. So just look out for me. Yeah. So I have I walk the dog a lot, so get out, change your context, change your environment, whatever that works for the individual. For me, it's getting outside in the countryside, walking the dog. Sometimes if you're going into a tough day, I have to kind of find my own energy because I've got to lead others through that. So if I'm not energized, that's not going to be easy. So I have to my friends, I call it a tribal dance. There's a few songs that I will put on really loudly first thing in the morning, and I'm a bit of a dancer, so I will dance round to these particular songs that just get me upbeat and kind of energized for the day. And then if the day hasn't gone so well for whatever reason, some flag waving with my neighbours and friends to go, right, let's just down tools. Let's go and have a drink, let's have a coffee, whatever it is, and get it out. I think it's so important to, particularly when so many people are virtual and working on their own, to find some outlet of actually voicing what's going on in the day, that proverbial brick wall, whatever it is, but getting it out rather than it going around in your head. So 3 things that I do there. Some of somewhat maybe slightly madly, but that's what I do.
No, it's great, and it reminds me of when you're on an airplane and they do the safety talk at the start, and they always say, put your mask on before you help anybody else. And it is, isn't it? You've got to look after yourself, because if you're not right in yourself, you can't help others. So look after yourself first is a critical message.
Yeah.
So we're coming towards the end, and we always end each episode with your one takeaway. What is the one thing that you think is an absolute essential aspect to have for successful change and transformation?
I think we've all already talked about the key one for me is understanding that why. But if I take another one from my experience when I worked in Japan, is trust. You have to build trust with the people that you are working with in all its foibles, whatever that means. Don't assume as well, is that that trust also extends to kind of, well, if I'm not getting the reaction that I expect, just taking one step back and go, well, why am I not getting that? I trust and respect this individual, so how do I get to understand that and ask a slightly different question. So once you've got trust, I think as a team you can do absolutely anything.
No, absolutely. I can't let this go though. So what are the key things that you do to build that trust? Because I totally agree, but it takes time to build, and it can be broken very, very quickly. So what are the things that you do to try to build it as quickly as you can?
So I think it's always, I go back to Japan actually, because that was such a different culture that and it's so fundamental in Japanese culture. If you haven't got it, you will find everything very difficult to do. So the things I always do, I said I was going to do. So if I said I was going to be at a meeting, or I said simple things in Japan, just being professional and doing the things that you say that you would. So agenda before the meeting, but making sure that it was all set up, follow up afterwards. If I said I was going to do that, that's what I would do. So I just do what I say I'm going to do. The other one is, again, that don't assume. And in Japan, most of the things are not how you're supposed to behave or kind of react, or kind of not written down, and they won't tell you. So if you're hitting your head against the brick wall, and we had loads of them, frustrations, we go, right, okay, we're approaching this the wrong way. Not that they're at fault, Not that why can't they just do it our way, but well, why are they reacting like that? Why are we not getting, and just asking a different, and it just takes you out and asks a different question. So you come back round to go, right, now that I understand that, I'll just approach it slightly differently. And by doing that, you build your own kind of respect, and kind of they know who you are, they know what you're going to say, and it's that ongoing respect that you just build up. You don't fall off the handle when you get the latest reaction or that you don't expect. I don't know whether that makes sense, but hopefully it does.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Well, that's really great. Thank you very much, Zoe. I'm sure the listeners found a number of nuggets in the last 3/4 an hour or so. So thank you very much for your time. And if there's any questions, are you happy to sort of put me to share those questions and start to engage in a discussion with any of the listeners?
Oh, absolutely. Of course. Delighted. And thank you for the time, Tony.
No, thank you very much. Speak soon. Thanks, Zoe. That was a great session. I'm sure there's lots for people to take forward as they progress in 2023 with their change and transformation programs. I trust that you found this episode of interest. If you have, please do share your comments, and please do subscribe and share your thoughts on the podcast as a whole so that we can spread the word and get the message out to as many people as possible. The podcast goes hand in hand with the approach that we take within the Transformation Leaders Hub, a community focused exclusively on those operating within change and transformation. So if you've not checked it out as yet, please do so today by clicking on the link in the show notes. I look forward to sharing another episode with you in a couple of weeks' time. So, bye for now.